here he is. Good afternoon, Dave. How the heck are you?
I'm at a loss for word, guys. Talk about a hell of a day in the world of football. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Of course, one of the biggest, if not the single biggest day of coaching news that I've ever covered, Dave, with Pete Carroll out and now Nick Saban retiring as well. Let's start there with Nick Saban. What impact do you think this has on college football and your beloved SEC?
I mean, everything. Like I said, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. I mean, Alabama's been the biggest constant in college football for almost 20 years, 2007. And you talk about him leaving on the eve of Texas and Oklahoma arriving. So, I mean, the landscape of the league was already going to change. And now I'm not going to say Alabama's in turmoil, but, they've got to find somebody to replace the greatest ever. Who do they hire? What type of domino effect does that have? Because Alabama's going to be able to go after whoever they want. So you would imagine the head coach of a very established program is probably going to get poached. That would be my guess. What's going to happen to Bama's current roster? How many guys are they going to lose? Because I believe when your head coach gets fired or retires, like within a month or so of signing day, all of those guys are like not bound to their letters. So, I mean, it's a hell of a transition for Alabama. The power structure of college football, obviously, assuming Saban doesn't go coach somewhere else, it's the end of the greatest career in the sport's history. Like, it's a lot to process. And yeah, I mean, it feels like the end of an era, which is fitting with the college football playoff expanding next year.
Yeah, it's wild. And then with the Pete Carroll news that we got today, it seemed like all signs were pointing Dan Quinn. Is that his most likely destination? I mean, do you think that does seem likely? And how nervous are you for the Cowboys losing Dan Quinn finally this time?
I mean, you have to consider it a possibility. I think Seattle would be silly not to cast a wide net. I mean, I think that's an appealing job. Assuming it sounds like John Schneider, the GM up in Seattle, who Brian Broaddus knows very well. It sounds like he's going to stay in town. So that's a guy who's acquired a lot of talent over the years, who's built a lot of good teams. So I think it's an appealing job in the short term and the long term. Yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn's history matters. Obviously, he coached the Legion of Boom. So if that's what they want to do, it makes sense. But if I were them, I would cast as wide of a net as possible to see who else might be interested. And, it's not that I want Dan Quinn to leave Dallas. I think he's done a hell of a job. But when you've had an established head coach who's had a successful run as a coordinator for 2 years, I mean, I kind of made peace with this being the last ride a long time ago. It was surprising the first time he did it. It was even more surprising the second time. I think you're asking for a lot to expect him to stay in place 3 consecutive years. So I think there's attractive options on Dallas's staff, whether that's Joe Witt Jr., whether that's Al Harris. I think there's a couple guys there who could do a good job getting elevated into that role. So, like I said, it's not like I'd be happy to see Dan leave after what he's done, but I just think after a certain point you kind of expect that, and you're not so surprised by it.
David, I've stood next to you on the sidelines at Lambeau Field. I've sat next to you in the press box at AT&T Stadium and been heartbroken by this team that the Cowboys are about to play. What is going to be different this time around?
You know what? I'll tell you what's going to be different this time around, Brian. And look, I have a tremendous – I like Jordan Love a lot. Like, not talking about best, but in terms of just like most fun players, in this doing the NFL on Fox podcast, I've watched so much more of the league than I did when I covered the Cowboys.
Sure.
And I mean, Jordan Love, and also I'll throw C.J. Stroud in there. Like, they're 2 of the most fun players going in the NFL right now. Just watching them play is a lot of fun if you like football. But the thing that's going to be different is in 2014 and 2016, the Packers had the boogeyman. Like, they had the undeniably best quarterback, not only in the game, but in the league.
Yeah.
And this time, it's Dak Prescott, who I don't think he's going to win MVP, but he certainly has a case. And as well as Jordan Love's played this year, Dak Prescott's the better quarterback. He's been through this. He's seen everything you can throw at him. He's going against the lesser defense in this matchup. There's no way anybody with a sound mind is taking Green Bay's defense over Dallas's in this matchup. And yeah, I think I'm never going to completely trust the Cowboys because I've just been through too much. But I think, you go into this game knowing you have the better quarterback, you have the better defense, you have the better overall team, and hopefully they play like it's Sunday. Because if they play as well as they're capable of, then they should win this game.
We were talking Dak a couple of days ago. It's probably got to be nice for you not having to have as many Dak arguments with, shall we say, unsound minds these days, Dave.
Look, it makes Sunday a lot less stressful when you know that you don't have to go in the next day and fight for Dak's honor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, we're all football fans. We all like talking ball. And I miss that from time to time where you're just like, oh man, I've got something I really want to get off my chest today, and I don't get to go on speak and argue about it. But yeah, it has, just in general, whether it's my dear friends on speak or anyone else. It's nice to see Dak kind of vindicate what I've been saying about him for a long time, which is I've never tried to say he's the best quarterback in the NFL, but he's a hell of a lot better than a lot of people want to give him credit for, and he's played like it this year.
What do you credit that for mostly? His increased efficiency or performance this year?
It's a good question. People say that all the time. I've been asked a few times this year, like, oh, what changed for Dak? And I'm like, nothing. He looks mostly like the same guy to me. I think it helps that CeeDee Lamb has truly leveled up into one of the best 3 or 4 receivers in the entire league. I think that definitely matters. And I think whatever that conversation was back around the bye week, and I think we talked about it last time I came on the show, whoever decided to put this team in Dak's hands, whether it was Dak himself or whether it was Mike McCarthy or the ownership, I don't know. But just giving him that chance to kind of take the lead. And you talk about a guy who's now been starting for what is this, his 8th year? At this point, there's nobody playing in the NFL right now who's seen more looks and gotten more years under his belt than Dak Prescott. Like, all those vets that were in the league when he came in are gone. Aaron Rodgers isn't playing this year. So I think experience, development, and plus having better talent around him than last year, it's just kind of all meshed together really, really well.
It's David Helman with us here in the GBag Nation. Watching Green Bay, you talked a little bit about Jordan Love. To me, it's still Aaron Rodgers and the rushing attack that gives me a little bit of nervousness entering the game. Well, what is it for you? If the Packers were to come in and upset the Cowboys, what are they most fearful of?
Yeah, Aaron Jones has had some big moments in that building, hasn't he? If I remember correctly. That's a good question. I think it's Matt LaFleur's ability to. They do such an admirable job of scheming up good looks for Jordan Love, and they can be so explosive, and it's wild because these receivers that he works with are so young, but they find ways to get him open. They find ways to create explosives. They do it with their tight ends too. Like, somehow it just seems like they get these guys lost in the coverage, and we know the Cowboys can be a little bit susceptible to that. So, I know the Cowboys have not been great against the run, but if Jonathan Hankins can play in this game, if Green Bay comes in and tries to play conservatively and lean on the run game, I don't think that's going to work. But I do think Matt LaFleur is a good coach, and Jordan Love has crazy, crazy arm talent. And, if these guys can generate 5-6 big explosive plays in the passing game, it could be trouble with, we like I said, we've seen the Cowboys can get caught cheating sometimes in the secondary. And I think this is a bad opponent to try to do that against.
Spray tan reference there for you, Brian.
Yeah, how about that? Hey, Dave, I've just completely given up on the Cowboys' running game. And I think it's going to be on the quarterback's shoulders and the play caller's shoulders, CeeDee Lamb's shoulders, and then Micah Parsons in the defense. Is that the wrong approach, or are you kind of going along with me on this one?
I tried to find some optimism because I thought Tony Pollard looked pretty good in Washington the other day, and then somebody
both times against the Commanders they've looked pretty good running the ball.
And somebody reminded me, look at all of Washington's metrics over the second half of the season, and keep in mind that Jonathan Allen didn't play in that game. I'm like, okay, you're probably right. I shouldn't get too carried away.
Yeah. Shouldn't let Carm do that to you, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing, though, I mean, look, Green Bay's defense has been atrocious very often this year. They let Carolina put 30 on them, and it was Tommy DeVito that ran for 100 on them on Monday Night Football. I thought that killed their hopes, really, when they managed to lose to the Giants on Monday Night Football. So, I think Green Bay's defense is probably porous enough that you could have at least some success, enough success to generate some balance. And on top of that, even if you can't, I think this is a defense that you can put the ball in Dak's hands in this game, especially at home where he's going to be able to operate and change calls and change the protections without having to scream over the crowd and all that stuff. I think this is a game where even if Dak has to do it all himself, he can absolutely do that. It's that I get worried about that when you're talking about playing the Niners of the world and some of those teams, but against this opponent, if Dak has to do it himself, I think he can get away with it.
What's the non-Cowboy Packer game this weekend that's going to be the most entertaining, you think?
I would love to know Brian's thoughts on this for as long as he's been in the NFL. And I know it was really great in the 90s, but in terms of I've been covering the league for a decade, and I don't remember a wild card weekend that looked this good on paper. It's incredible, man. And the matchups are good. The storylines are good. Obviously, I think everybody's talking about the Goff-Stafford Bowl in Detroit on Sunday night. But I don't know. Seeing if Mahomes can reignite the Chiefs at Arrowhead against the Dolphins with the weather down at 0 degrees. I mean, sure. I'm glad I don't have to be there. But that's going to be a really, really fun game. And then even I feel like people are down on the Eagles-Bucks game, but I can't wait to see, can the Eagles pull out of that nosedive, or, can the Bucks take advantage of it? The Eagles played in Tampa in week 3.
Yeah.
And they ran all over them. They ran for 230 yards. And remember, I think DeAndre Swift ran for 180. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to rush for 2,000 yards this year. And then Philly forgot he was on their team. So I can't wait to see if they remember that. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin going against that awful secondary. I think Monday night's going to be really entertaining too.
How good are the Rams?
Very, very good. They're 7-1 over the last half of the season, and their one loss came in overtime on a punt return to Baltimore, of all teams. I mean, they run the ball better than anybody gives them credit for. Matthew Stafford he's been one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league, in my opinion, this year. Not enough people are talking about what Matthew Stafford's done. Their defensive line, they've got obviously Aaron Donald, but they have a couple rookies on their front that have developed into really solid pass rushers. I mean, I know that they're a trendy pick, but I get why they're a trendy pick. And if we assume the Cowboys can handle business.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you here.
I mean, if we assume that happens, then if the Rams can get past Detroit, now you're talking about a divisional rematch in the divisional round. I know the Niners are barely they're unbeatable, and if I had to pick, I'd probably pick the Niners to win the Super Bowl. But I don't know, man. Don't write off the Rams in the divisional round. We've seen that type of stuff before from those two teams. So. Yeah, I buy the Rams hype big time.
So would you fear the Rams second most in the conference right now? How would you rank the possible Cowboy opponents?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Yeah, of teams that I wouldn't want the Cowboys to have to play, I think it would go Niners, followed by the Rams, followed by the Lions probably, and then everything else is whatever.
Okay, as an LSU fan, who's the guy you'd least like to see replace Saban as head coach?
I mean, if I was Alabama, I would get Kirby Smart on the phone immediately and just try to money whip him and say, look, I know that's your alma mater, but we'll pay you this to come keep it rolling at Bama. I would really hate that.
Dan Lanning.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I think Dan Lanning is a really good coach. That would upset me. Those two probably. And then as long as they don't come trying to sniff around our guy, I like the job Brian Kelly's doing, and it would make me very unhappy if Bama stole our coach a second time.
Yeah, I don't know if this would scare you, but could this be a worst-case scenario for Texas if they go for Sark and then maybe he brings Arch Manning along with him?
I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't make Texas fans happy. Just purely me as an SEC LSU homer, I don't know. I'm not sold on Sark being like on that level where I should be terrified if Alabama hires him. And the same honestly goes for Arch Manning. We'll see what happens. Maybe I eat those words, but I can think of at least a few guys that would bother me at Alabama before I got to Sark. But like I said, I mean, oh God, geez, we'll see. But
keep your fingers out of that one.
He's talking to Urban, not you, David.
Like I said, they're going to do something insane. Alabama just cares about football on a level that even other SEC schools don't really get, I think. So, I mean, they're going to swing for the fences, and they're going to die trying to make a splash, and I wouldn't put it past them.
Hell of a job, Dave. Of course, we're very proud of you, and it's cool that you haven't gone Hollywood on us yet. Never, not for y'all. I'm always down to chat with the GBag Nation, and hopefully the Cowboys can keep the egg off their face this weekend and give us something to look forward to next week.
We gonna see in Vegas, Dave, for the Super Bowl?
I really hope so. Yeah. That is still a bit up in the air.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens, but I mean, I will be busy with wall-to-wall coverage regardless, whether it's from LA or Vegas. So, yeah, it's shaping up to be a really fun month.
Well, good. We'll see you on the draft show here then real soon. All right? Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
I mean, hey, as much as I like talking NFL, please, let's talk some prospects soon.